Hi again, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Tom Pipines Show with John Dodds, who is the MVP, the Aaron Rodgers of this podcast, ladies and gentlemen. Speaking of the green and gold, they are 7-1 after going into KC, and I don't care if they have Patrick Mahomes or not with all that speed and that crowd, and winning 31-24 on Sunday evening. What can you possibly say about this team in terms of exceeding expectations? They've been magnificent, but let's give you the breaking news as we know it. The trade deadline came and went. The Packers didn't do anything except cut the disappointing punt returner and receiver Darius Shepard, and they activated Tremont Smith, who has experience returning kicks. Your reaction to Brian Gutekunst and company not making a move, especially on defense?
Yeah, it looked like that they were possibly looking at run-stuffing defensive linemen. If I had to wave a magic wand, it would be, can you pick up Grady Jackson from 2003 or Howard Green from 2010? Big guys, beefy, because it looks like Kenny Clark is starting to break down just a little bit. He's got some leg issues. And it all starts with stopping the run on defense. They're good at pass rush. They're good at cover. They have speed. Kansas City, even with 6 key players down on their offensive line, their quarterback, and their linebackers, that's a tough place to play. It's noisy. Andy Reid is an offensive genius, and if you give him 10 days to figure out a game plan, which he did, I'm sure he was doing things that went against tendencies, and the Packer defense was really struggling, but the play of the game was when Lancaster forced that fumble. That tilted the field the other way.
Lancaster's been playing well, huh?
He is, and the great deal about him, he's a free agent, so he comes cheap. When you're on the salary cap, you got to pay for the Smiths, you got to pay for A-Rod, you got to pay for the big guy. The big guys are the Adams, the wide receiver, but you need those quality free agents, and he was definitely one. And so what you're getting is a free agent. I mean, he's not the greatest in the world, but what he's doing, he's probably doing a lot better than some of the $10 million a year players that are being traded. So he's a salary cap absolute gem.
And maybe what they're saying is we're going to get Davante Adams back, hopefully for the Chargers game. And that's like a pretty good signing for us. We've been doing okay, certainly on offense, to say the least. LaFleur, Rodgers, and company will get right to that. I am disappointed that they didn't go somehow for someone to improve the D, because I think this is a team that does have now, we could possibly, who'd have thunk it at the beginning of the season, Super Bowl aspirations. But they're going to roll the way they are. They have faith in Pettine and that unit. When you talk about Kansas City, you have to talk about Aaron Rodgers, who is in MVP form again with 3 more touchdown passes, including the one to Jamal Williams that had a 19% chance of being completed, according to all the people who figure out the numbers. And then the play of Aaron Jones. Davante Adams goes down, and this guy just takes off. They're 4-0 without number 17. You know you want him back, but 159 yards worth of catches and ran the ball for 65 yards or so. I mean, I don't think correct me if I'm wrong, John, a Packers player has not done that since Jordy Nelson, to catch 2 TDs in a game and 150 yards. And since the merger, I don't think it's happened for a green and gold running back. Talk to me about 33.
Yeah, he's the best running back I've seen since Eddie Lee Ivory in terms of, but Eddie Lee Ivory just before he blew the knee.
Injury.
There was a game in 1979 at County Stadium. It was the final exhibition game. He had a 46-yard touchdown reception out of the backfield, and he had a 46-yard touchdown run. And I'm thinking, there is Chuck Foreman. The Packers drafted Chuck Foreman from Georgia Tech. We are set. The Packers are set for the next 10 years. And a week later, he's at Soldiers Field. He's got 3 carries, 50 yards, and on that 3rd carry, he breaks and he steps in, and he, without getting touched, blows the ACL. So when Aaron Jones left the game, and he had shoulder issues in the first half, so whatever they gave him, I have to get me some of that. I don't know what they gave him.
I'll take it just to get out of bed.
But this is Terry Metcalf. What's exciting about Jones is he's a 5th round pick. So again, he's low low cost on the, but he's becoming one of those Bob McGinn purple elite players. Those are really, that get the elite player.
The famed Packers beat writer for all those years.
Yeah, when Bob used to rate those players, but it's amazing. It's exponential improvement since the beginning of the year. There's no way. Now, the last couple of years, he's shown the ability to run and cut and vision. In fact, in 2017, Rodgers said after the Dallas game, he had 100 yards and a touchdown, that he had the best vision of any running back he's ever played with. That included Marshawn Lynch in college. The interesting thing is how short he is. He went up to Michelle Tafoya, and Michelle Tafoya was kind of looking down at him because he'll go 5'7", 5'8", but those are the types of guys that are really difficult to find. And when he's cutting around, there are some times this year I've noticed where he's had touchdown runs from the 5-yard line where nobody on defense saw where he was. They cut, they did something, they misdirected, and they're looking around, and he kind of sneaks in, and pretty soon they look at him as they're going by. But what's really impressive is the way he's improved his blitz pickup. He's improved his catching ability out in the flat. He's become an elite back, and it's
a great 1-2 punch with Jamal Williams, who of course caught that amazing touchdown pass. And
you cannot overuse.
Right.
Aaron Jones.
That's the thing, the 1-2 punch, the different styles. I agree with you, JD.
So
it's exciting as can be, and it's exciting to see how Matt LaFleur is using these guys. And as you said on our last podcast, I believe, you've got motion, you put somebody in motion, it gets people going, and they're able to. On the negative side, Rodgers was sacked 5 times. He took some pretty hard hits. On the positive side, he's throwing the ball like never before, or certainly back to his MVP days, and he's running well. His legs are obviously healthy, but the biggest thing to me that I notice is he and LaFleur are on the same page. There have been compromises made on both sides. How key to that has that been to the success?
You asked that question on an earlier podcast earlier in the year, and that was the $64,000 question, that LaFleur had the structure. Here's my structure. Hey, 35-year-old veteran, I want you to work within my system. And you were saying what's going to happen. And I mentioned at the time, your $33 million a year player has to win, because if he buys in, if LaFleur can just swallow his ego and take a step back, he'll extend a play. He'll say something at the line and get Vitale out against Oakland out in the flat, and he'll hit him. And he can make your average wide receivers. We talked about last week, his wide receiver crew, only one of them was drafted. It was in the 5th round, and that was MVS. Everyone else is a free agent.
It's magnificent.
Without Davante Adams.
It's unbelievable. I don't know, as I've said, this to me is somewhat unprecedented, but please.
No, A-Rod LaFleur, to his credit, has backed away. And that's probably the most interesting thing coming out of that game was he said that in the 4th quarter, I just sat back and let Aaron Rodgers be Aaron Rodgers and let him do it. And I said, he's figured that out. That's great. Now, he's helping him with his system and the play-action fakes and the fake end-arounds and the jet sweeps. You could just tell during the game that when they zoomed in on LaFleur, he's looking at Kansas City's speed. And he's thinking, we're about 1 or 2 years away from drafting like a Randall Cobb but with 4.3 speed. Yeah. They don't have it. Darius Shepard, who they just cut this week, is what they're looking for, but he's a 4.5, 4.6 guy. He's got everything but the speed. They're going to look for that. But when LaFleur said that pass by Aaron Rodgers might have been to Jamal Williams in the back of the end zone, might have been one of the greatest passes he's ever seen live in a game, that said it all, where I think they've totally bought into each other. They know what to do. Let A-Rod earn his $33 million, and LaFleur is earning his $5 or $6 million by setting everybody up. He's structuring them. You talked about the sacks. The sacks in a noisy stadium. Aaron Rodgers, you get part of your $33 million because he can go up to the line, he can see what's happening, and he can set up the blocking schemes. Well, in that noise, they can't hear. And the first sack that Brian Bulaga gave up all year was from the outside, and you could tell it pre-snap, he's in a stance and he's looking inside to see when the ball gets snapped because he can't hear it and there's no signal. So by the time it's snapped and he goes back, that guy has moved probably this much, and that was the
can't
difference.
catch up, huh?
Can't catch up. Seattle has that difference. That's why Seattle doesn't quite play as well on the road as they do at home.
Yeah. He took the 17-yarder. Well, yeah, you're holding on that ball, but you know he's trying to make plays. And so to me, once again, what they're doing is absolutely astounding. You hope it can continue. On the defensive side, it seemed like they were lost. They couldn't do, and Mike Pettin, as you're aware, JD, chose not to blitz. Respect out of the. If the Packers had the speed of Kansas City,
Just one guy.
Yeah.
Just one of those guys. Yeah.
Any one of them. Jeepers,
Right.
they had 3 or 4 of them. And they kept getting burned because they weren't going to be beaten deep, if you will. But yet in the second half, they held them to 105 yards and the 7 points. The turnover was certainly key. Adjustments there, or do you think he just stayed patient and it worked out? They did just enough to win this ball game from a defensive perspective.
Yeah, it was a total adjustment. In the first half, Pettin went man to man, and he was thinking that the subs on the Kansas City offensive line wouldn't match up to the 5-man pressure he was going to put.
Couldn't get the pressure, though.
There wasn't any pressure, so then with time, that the quarterback was able to, in man-to-man defense, the Packers, as fast as they are in the secondary, and it's a lot. And I would say Savage is probably, he looked like he was about 90%, not totally back or whatever. But,
The ankle, yeah.
But King, Alexander, they're fast players. They were having trouble hanging on. And when they did the jet sweep misdirection, they faked a jet sweep, then they faked a screen pass and sucked everybody in. And Kelsey went behind Blake Martinez for a walk-in 27-yard touchdown. I think that's when they decided in the second quarter they went to go zone. So instead of one deep safety and man-to-man all across, they put 2 safeties back and kept everybody in front of them. And
Matt Moore wasn't going to beat him deep, you wouldn't think. He had that wonderful ball, as you say, to Kelsey, where both quarterback and receiver had to make an adjustment to make that happen. But they were doing all the short stuff, though, and I thought that Andy Reid called a brilliant game. And yet, as you say, the adjustment was key. That's a salient point you bring up about the conversion from man-to-man in the first half going to the zone. So kudos to Pettin and kudos to this Packers team, which certainly has exceeded expectations. Are they for real now? That's why it bugs me. If you're right there, don't you do something? Obviously, they must have wanted too much, the folks who might have traded a receiver or somebody, the D lineman, or even a linebacker to play next to the injured Blake Martinez, who has the club. And yet they must feel like, you know what, we can continue to roll here.
They've made a decision that they're going, when you see Tremont Williams in the game, that's the 5th defensive back. So they've made a decision, we're going to take out a middle linebacker and we're going to go a little bit smaller in the front 7, but we're going to be able to cover better. So they've made that decision.
They'll concede the yards, but hope to, the old bend don't break thing, which for the most part I think they've done.
Right. No, they've done that. It's the pass rush from the Smiths was still there. There was some when the Kansas City quarterback, you could tell when he got rushed, he threw the ball. There were wide open guys that he was missing. The defense, if they just could find, if New Orleans would cut Grady Jackson like in 2003, or if they could pick up a Howard, I think the Jets cut Howard, the big lineman back in 2010. So that's the big problem that they have is stopping the run. But if their best run stuffer, as I've mentioned before, is Aaron Rodgers. It's his efficiency. If you're up 17-3, you can't run. In terms of being 7-1, I had him at 7-1.
You've got him going 12 wins, and people are starting to think, JD, the historian here, is right.
Well, I had him 12, but it's always if Aaron Rodgers, Bakhtiari, Balaga, and
Kevin King,
those are the 4. If those guys, so when you said Devontae Adams was hurt a couple weeks ago, it makes a difference, but it doesn't make a difference like those 4 guys that I mentioned, because Kevin King, even though he's not Willie Buchanan or Ronnie Lott, he allows you to put Alexander anywhere and make plays in the middle. So just having Kevin King there, and Kevin King, yeah, he gets burned 1 out of every 5 times, but then he'll make a play 1 out of every 10. He'll get a turnover.
He has a knack, doesn't he? Yeah, coming
He
up with
does.
a turnover, pick, whatever. So you'll take it.
Yeah. So did you want to look at the San Diego game then, or do
Yeah. Let's move. Unless there's anything else you want to share, anything going forward, but I think we've gotten into that. So you look ahead to a Sunday afternoon game, and the biggest thing, John, as you said before we started yapping here on this latest podcast, it's going to be like a home game. You'll have 60% of the people in the seats wearing green and gold. It's a ninth home game, is it not?
And if it's a ninth home game, that gives Aaron Rodgers more freedom to make changes of the line with more effectiveness in the quiet. So that's going to be a big plus. The big concern in this game is it seemed like the Packers really the whole team was spent after the game. Covering those fast guys, that was a stress. The offense got stressed. There were long plays. And so you have a 4.5-hour flight, 5-hour flight from Green Bay. So that's one issue.
See where Matt LaFleur mixed it up, and he basically gave them the day off unless they needed to do some weight work or they were required to come in for medical treatment. Probably not a bad move physically, and also, you know what? Thanks a lot, Coach. We needed that break.
No, in my 12-4 scenario, I had them losing at Kansas City for their first loss and then against the Chargers. So I had those 2 losses. But the Chargers have had a ton of injuries in their offensive line, and they can't run as well. But they just fired their offensive coordinator, Ken Wisenhunt, and teams like to get fired up over that. That always sends a supercharge into the team because the team wants everybody to know. Must be a psychological issue that it wasn't their fault. It wasn't our fault. It was that guy. Now that he's gone, boy, look at us go. And you have Melvin Gordon coming back. He's done nothing coming back. But he did have a nice
touchdown against the Bears.
He did have a nice run against the Bears,
Yeah.
but I think he's going to be ready and going with authority, playing against the Packers, kind of the old home team. So this is going to be an interesting game. If I had to predict, I would say the Packers win the game 30-29. It's going to be extremely close. This is the game where the Smith brothers, I think, have to really put on the pass rush because Rivers is not he's 37 now. He's not mobile.
He's the old gamer, but
boy,
he seems to be slowing down.
He's got
bit.
great weapons.
Yeah.
He's got a nice tight end, and he's got a big wide receiver in Williams, and then he's got Keenan Allen, kind of more of the Adams type the other way. So, but the Packers, when Pettin, the key to a Mike Pettin defense is the corners. And I learned that from Bill Polian. He talked about that when Pettin was hired 2 years ago. And if you have Kevin King up and Alexander up, and you can guard those guys, they'll get burned every now and then, but that frees up everyone else to stuff the run or to go over into the middle. And last year when they lost King, now you have to move Alexander over. You can't do as much. And then Alexander missed a couple of games. And then it was Katie bar the door. You just have some guys that aren't even on the team anymore trying to guard, and that's when complacency sets in. When the team just doesn't have the talent. It's all about the talent. Right now they're going really well, but they can. This is a winnable game, and so is the Carolina game.
Yeah.
So you could possibly be 9-1
whether
at the
Cam
bye.
Newton comes back or not, right? Which would be, again, I don't know. There aren't words.
Yeah.
As we look back and then we say, well, 8-8, maybe 9-7, but again, you do take them a game at a time. And as you say, this is a team that could have been 2-6, except that the Bears can't find a kicker to save themselves, and so the Chargers managed to escape. Special teams, anything but for the Packers. That to me is a weak area too. They've got to find some sort of a return man, and they have trouble covering. There's always a concern with me that somebody's going to run it back again. We've seen it. So what do they do there? Is there anything they can do to shore up that most important element when you talk about offense, defense, and then you need the third? Now, again, I think the standards have changed. We have got to think, win the NFC North. I know the Vikings are right on their heels. And then hopefully go deep in the playoffs. So if we're going to have that kind of a standard, not unlike the Milwaukee Bucks with Giannis and company, what can they do? Or are they just pretty much stuck with what they have?
Well, when you think of to me, when you think of special teams, you think of J.K. Scott first because he's the punter and he's the holder for Crosby. Because I would say 90% of the time when Crosby misses, there was some screw up with the hold.
Yeah.
But he'll never point that out. But Scott is holding very well this year. Scott's much improved, although you can still tell he's a young player. I think the wind at Kansas City really messed with him, and he was trying to do too many things.
Wasn't as good as he's been.
He wasn't as good. But I think they have too many defensive backs and wide receivers and too few linebackers on their cover teams. And what you need is you need tight ends, you need bigger guys who can run. And right now it seems like, I know they have a tight end who's injured and off. And so I think they're running too many small players. Although,
can't get off blocks.
Although it did, toward the end of the game, I would say the last 3 kickoffs were impressive, where they jacked the receiver or the returner between the 20 and the 25-yard line, although there was a couple times where he was just one step away from taking it the distance.
Yep.
So can they do anything? You really can't. And
try to be creative with scheme, I guess, but you can only do so much.
Yeah.
So you're going 30-20. I don't know. I'm drinking that Kool-Aid now, John.
Are you?
I'm thinking Packers 35 and the Chargers 24. How's that for you?
Okay.
But of course, you go to the bank with JD's pick at 30-29 green and gold. Nonetheless, everyone would take 8-1. Any final thoughts before we sign off here, my friend?
No, if you're a Packer fan, you should be excited because the team is nowhere near its ceiling yet. Everything's been falling right. They've been playing teams at the right time.
Yep.
When quarterbacks have been hurt.
What you said.
The only one that kind of came back and bit them was the Philadelphia game where they played an aroused team, and Balaga, Adams, and King were injured toward the end of that Philadelphia game, and they couldn't react to it. When Adams comes back, the team's going to take a jump up. So maybe he comes back after the bye. That would be basically in 4 weeks.
There are thoughts that he might even be back for the Chargers game. Perhaps not. I don't know. I mean,
don't mess with him.
If they feel like they can get by until otherwise it'll linger, right? An impact. He's a speed guy.
That's right.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll tell you what.
The rest of the offense, if they get Adams back with the way they're using the wide receiver, or the way they're using the running backs in lieu of the wide receivers, it's going to be a really tough offense to defend. And can the defense improve? I think the defense will improve as Savage gets a little bit better, but the overall situation is health. As long as your guys are still healthy, if the top 10 guys on your salary cap are healthy, right now really only Adams is gone, and that is not essential. It's kind of like when...
it's hard to believe with the number 1 receiver, given what they have, as you say, the 5th rounder in free agents. But it's working. And that's a great credit, I think, again, to the quarterback and the head coach.
And the coaching staff. I didn't know anything about the coaching staff, but I've become impressed. McCarthy was totally impressed with that coaching staff. For what they did, they were able to, especially in 2010 when they won the Super Bowl, they had 18 guys put on injured reserve. Only one of them was like a blue chip player, and that was Jermichael Finley. Nick Barnett, Ryan Grant. There were a lot of other guys that could be replaced who got hurt during that year, but Finley was the only guy that they had to replace him with Corliss. So there's a big drop off, but they go 4 wide receivers they play driver more. They throw it to Jennings more. They could pivot right away, and then Nelson stepped up. With Adams out, they've been able to step up with the running backs, and Kumro kind of has shown something. So when Adams comes back, I think the offense could be pretty darn good. But A-Rod's buying into it, which is big. He's starting to figure out how to, hey, you go over here, and he's calling signals to, in the defense, they hate that because that's an adjustment that they can't defend.
Aaron Rodgers at his best. There is nobody better, with all due respect to Tom Brady, who is certainly in a great system. For the historian, he'll give it to you. He'll give you past, present, future. Hopefully this team will make great history this season. 7-1 with John Dodds. I'm Tom Pippins. That's the Tom Pippins Show. I should mention you can catch us at tompippins.com or right here at WSS Sports, Wisconsin Sports Stream. They're our partners, and it's a great look because of them. See you next time. Thanks for tuning in.